My mother-in-law tried to steal our house while my husband was in a coma. I fought back. My husband, Mark, and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. We had built a beautiful life from scratch, a life that revolved around our shared dreams, our 2 incredible children, and the home we had poured our hearts into. It wasn't a mansion, just a cozy, 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but it was ours. Every nail, every paint stroke, every garden bed held a memory. We had saved for years, scrimped and sacrificed to make that down payment. Mark was a carpenter, and he had personally renovated much of it, his skilled hands turning our house into a true home. I worked as a graphic designer, primarily from home, which allowed me flexibility with our children, a 5-year-old daughter, Lily, and a 3-year-old son, Ben. Our life was far from perfect, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the comfortable rhythm of a family unit. Then, disaster struck. Mark was on a job site, working on a new deck installation, when a support beam unexpectedly gave way. He fell, sustaining a severe head injury and multiple fractures. The call came while I was making dinner, a moment that is now burned into my memory with a horrifying clarity. The world tilted on its axis. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, hushed conversations with doctors, and the crushing weight of uncertainty. Mark was in a medically induced coma, fighting for his life. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but warned of a long road to recovery, if he recovered at all. My children were too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, but they sensed my fear, their innocent eyes reflecting my anxiety. I tried to be strong for them, to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but inside, I was crumbling. During this agonizing period, Mark's mother, Susan, became a constant, unwelcome presence. Susan had always been difficult, a woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of entitlement. She had never truly approved of me, seeing me as not good enough for her precious son, despite my efforts to build a relationship with her. She often made thinly veiled comments about my working from home, implying I didn't really work, and criticized my parenting choices. Mark had always been my shield, deflecting her negativity with good humor and unwavering support for me. But now, he was unconscious, and I was vulnerable. Susan's visits to the hospital were less about supporting Mark and more about scrutinizing me. She questioned every decision the doctors made, every medication administered, and then, invariably, she would turn her attention to our home and finances. "Are you sure you can manage the house payments, dear?" she'd ask, her voice dripping with false concern. "Mark always handled everything. Perhaps it would be easier if you stayed with me and let me take care of things." I brushed off her comments, attributing them to her stress and grief. I was wrong. One afternoon, about a month into Mark's coma, I returned home from the hospital to find Susan already there. She had let herself in, as she often did, claiming she was checking on the children, who were with my sister for the day. She was sitting at our kitchen table, a stack of legal-looking documents spread out before her. My heart immediately sank. "What's all this, Susan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She looked up, a triumphant gleam in her eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. "Just looking into Mark's affairs, dear. Someone has to, now that he's incapacitated. You know, making sure everything is in order." "Mark's affairs are handled, Susan. We have a joint account, and I have power of attorney." I had made sure of that immediately after the accident. "Ah, yes, power of attorney," she purred, tapping a manicured finger on one of the documents. "But that only extends so far, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to assets. This house, for example. It's a significant asset." "What about the house, Susan?" I asked, my voice now tight with alarm. "Well, dear, it's quite simple. Mark's name is on the deed, isn't it? And since he's unable to manage his affairs, and you're just, well, his wife, it stands to reason that as his mother, I should have a say in protecting his interests. For his children's future, of course." My mind raced. What was she implying? "This is our family home, Susan. Mark and I own it jointly." "Yes, but you know how these things go," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "If anything were to happen to Mark, God forbid, the house would go into probate, wouldn't it? And then who knows what might happen? It would be so much simpler, so much more secure, if I just took over ownership. As a safeguard, you understand. I'd be holding it in trust for the children, naturally." I stared at her, utterly aghast. She was proposing to take our house, my home, the place where my children were growing up, where Mark and I had built our lives. While he lay unconscious, fighting for his life, his own mother was trying to steal it from under my feet. The audacity, the cruelty, was breathtaking. "You can't be serious, Susan," I finally managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, but I am, dear," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's for the best. You're clearly overwhelmed. This way, you wouldn't have to worry about mortgage payments, taxes, upkeep. I'd handle everything. And you and the children could stay, of course, until you found something more suitable. Somewhere smaller, perhaps, that you could afford on your own." The implication was clear. She intended to kick us out eventually. She wanted our home. A cold rage began to simmer within me, a protective fire ignited by her callous greed. "Susan, this house is not for sale, not for transfer, and certainly not for you to take over. Mark and I worked incredibly hard for this. It's our home, and it will remain our home." Her smile vanished. "Don't be difficult, dear. I'm trying to help you. Mark would want what's best for his children, and I am their grandmother. I know what's best." "You know what's best for yourself, Susan," I retorted, my voice gaining strength. "This is predatory. Mark is in a coma, and you're trying to capitalize on our tragedy." "How dare you accuse me of such a thing?" she shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "I am simply protecting my son's legacy. You, a graphic designer who works from home, what do you know about managing significant assets? You'll run this house into the ground." "Get out of my house, Susan," I said, pointing towards the door. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was solid. She rose, gathering her documents with a huff. "You'll regret this, dear. You'll see. When Mark wakes up, he'll understand. He'll thank me for looking out for him when you clearly couldn't." She stormed out, leaving me trembling with anger and fear. I knew she wouldn't give up. This wasn't just a fleeting thought for her. This was a calculated move. I immediately called my sister, Sarah, and poured out the entire horrifying conversation. Sarah, bless her, was furious. "We need to get a lawyer, now," she said firmly. "This is insane." The next day, I met with a lawyer specializing in family law and real estate. I explained the situation, and he listened patiently, his expression growing increasingly serious. He confirmed my fears. While Mark and I owned the house jointly, without clear documentation explicitly stating what happens if one owner becomes incapacitated or dies, Susan could potentially cause a lot of trouble, especially if she tried to argue I was an unfit guardian for the children or somehow mismanaging their inheritance. My power of attorney covered financial and medical decisions, but a prolonged incapacitation could open loopholes for someone as determined and ruthless as Susan. He advised me to take immediate steps to protect our assets and my parental rights. First, he helped me draft a comprehensive durable power of attorney document, explicitly outlining my sole authority over all of Mark's assets and medical decisions in the event of his incapacitation. This document went beyond the standard one I had, making it much more robust against challenges. We also looked into the specifics of our house deed. Thankfully, it was held as joint tenants with right of survivorship, meaning if one of us died, the other would automatically inherit full ownership. This was a huge relief, but Mark wasn't dead, he was merely incapacitated, which was a grey area Susan was clearly trying to exploit. The lawyer advised me to file a declaration of homestead on the property, which would protect a portion of the equity from creditors and, importantly, make it much harder for anyone to force a sale or transfer of the property without my consent. He also suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter to Susan, warning her against any further interference with our property or finances and threatening legal action if she persisted. It felt aggressive, but he assured me it was necessary to establish boundaries and put her on notice. While I was taking these legal steps, Susan continued her campaign of psychological warfare. She would show up at the hospital, loudly questioning my choices in front of nurses and doctors, implying I wasn't visiting Mark enough, I was there every single day, for hours, or that I wasn't advocating for his care properly. She even tried to spread rumors among our mutual acquaintances that I was financially irresponsible and planning to sell the house to fund a lavish lifestyle. These were painful, but I tried to focus on Mark and the children. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I received a certified letter. It was from Susan's lawyer. She was petitioning the court for temporary guardianship of Mark's assets, claiming I was incapable of managing them and that she, as his mother, was better equipped to protect his interests, especially for the sake of her grandchildren. She was also trying to get a court order to prevent me from making any major financial decisions regarding the house. The lawyer hadn't been wrong. She was relentless. My lawyer was ready. He had anticipated this. We had all the necessary documents prepared. We filed my comprehensive durable power of attorney, the declaration of homestead, and a detailed affidavit outlining Susan's attempts to seize our property while Mark was in a coma. We also included testimonials from several hospital staff members who had witnessed Susan's disruptive behavior and baseless accusations against me. The court hearing was incredibly stressful. Susan sat across from me, radiating malice, flanked by her own formidable lawyer. She tried to portray me as a negligent wife and mother, painting a picture of me frittering away Mark's money and neglecting his care. She even brought up old, petty arguments we'd had, twisting them to make me look bad. But my lawyer systematically dismantled her claims. He presented the evidence of her attempts to seize the house, her harassing behavior, and the robust legal protections I had put in place. He emphasized that I was not only Mark's legal spouse but also had valid, comprehensive power of attorney, and that her actions were an egregious attempt to exploit a tragic situation. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence, was clearly unimpressed with Susan. He dismissed her petition for temporary guardianship, rebuking her for her unwarranted and malicious interference in her son's affairs. He made it clear that my power of attorney was valid and absolute, and that any further attempts to challenge it or interfere with our property would result in serious legal consequences, potentially even contempt of court charges. Susan was livid, her face a mask of fury, but she remained silent, her lawyer clearly having advised her against further outbursts. The victory in court was a huge relief, but it didn't make Mark wake up. My focus remained solely on him. Every day, I spoke to him, read to him, played his favorite music, hoping some part of him could hear me, could feel our love. Lily and Ben would draw pictures for him, little masterpieces taped to the wall by his bed. Then, 6 weeks after the accident, something shifted. A flicker in his eyelids. A slight movement of his fingers. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Mark began to emerge from the coma. It was a long, arduous process, filled with setbacks and tiny victories. He had to relearn everything: how to speak, how to walk, how to eat. The physical therapy was grueling, the cognitive therapy even more so. But he was fighting, and I was there every step of the way. During his slow recovery, I briefly mentioned Susan's actions, wanting him to be aware but not wanting to upset him too much. He listened, his brow furrowed, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "She tried to take our house?" he asked, his voice still weak but laced with disbelief. I nodded, explaining the legal battle. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise of support. As Mark's recovery progressed, his memory slowly returned. He remembered the accident, bits and pieces of the hospital, and then the full scope of his mother's treachery began to sink in. He was devastated, not just for the betrayal against me, but for the fundamental breach of trust by his own mother. When he was finally strong enough to have more coherent conversations, he made a decision that shocked me, even given everything that had happened. He cut her off. Completely. He called her from the hospital, a nurse present to ensure he didn't overexert himself. I was in the room, but across the curtain, out of sight. I could hear his voice, still a little slurred, but firm. He told her he knew everything she had tried to do. He told her he was disgusted by her actions, that she had chosen greed over empathy, and that she had tried to hurt the family he had built. He told her he needed space, a lot of space, and that he wouldn't be communicating with her for the foreseeable future. He hung up before she could launch into her usual tirade. Susan, of course, went ballistic. She tried to call him back repeatedly. She left voicemails full of accusations, self-pity, and thinly veiled threats. She tried to come to the hospital, but I had already instructed the staff that she was not to be allowed in without my explicit permission, which I never gave. She even tried to contact the children's school, making outlandish claims, but they were well aware of the situation and politely but firmly rebuffed her. Mark's recovery took over a year. It was a journey of immense courage, resilience, and unwavering support from our family and friends. My sister, Sarah, was a rock, helping with the children, bringing meals, and just being there. My own parents, who lived a few states away, came often to help and offer their love. Through it all, our house remained our sanctuary, a tangible symbol of everything we had fought to protect. Mark eventually made a near-full recovery, a testament to his strength and the incredible medical care he received. He still has some lingering issues with fatigue and occasional short-term memory lapses, but he is back at work, back to being a father, And back to being my husband, Susan occasionally sends an email or a card, always filled with platitudes and passive-aggressive digs at me, implying I'm manipulating Mark. We ignore them. Mark has made it clear that until she genuinely acknowledges and apologizes for her actions, there will be no reconciliation. So far, she hasn't. The experience, though terrifying and heartbreaking, ultimately strengthened our family. It showed me the depths of my own resilience and the incredible love Mark and I share. It also taught me a harsh lesson about greed and betrayal, and the importance of protecting what is yours. Our home, once just bricks and mortar, now stands as a monument to our enduring love and our unwavering fight for each other.